wages of sin!
What?
The wages of sin!
He left a message. The wages of sin.
The wages of sin is...
Death.
It's a Bible verse. Give me the book and verse number.
It's from Romans.
Look in Romans.
Welcome back to Boys Bible Study. We are your three favorite religious extremists. My name's Ash. I am here with
Scott.
And Julian.
And we have a really interesting Christian thriller for you today. Believe it or not, you can still be Christian and also be thrilled at the same time. And with us today to talk about this is someone who's a horror expert. We have author Maggie Siebert, whose new book Bonding is out now on Expat Press. Welcome, Maggie.
So great to be here.
Yeah, so nice to have you. We have a lot to talk about. First, I wanted to talk about Bonding because it's a really amazing book. I have to recommend it to anyone who's listening. A really disturbing and beautiful collection of short stories. So congratulations on the release.
Thank you so much. It means so much to me that you liked it and like connected with it.
I absolutely loved it. This is your first book, right?
Yes. Yeah.
How does that feel?
It's weird. It's like the first thing I can like kind of ever really remember wanting to do.
Yeah.
And it happened, and now I'm kind of just like, all right, I guess I have to like do another one now.
Yes.
Yeah. No, it's been great and weird and like all the things you'd expect it to be, I guess.
Yeah. Congratulations on that. It's a great debut. And
thank you.
You know, just I don't want to spoil too much because I do think Boys Bible Study listeners would really love to check it out if you are a fan of horror. But just a theme or two I wanted to bring up. In the short story, I believe the one I'm thinking of is the final story, Every Day for the Rest of Your Life. You have a character in there whose life was profoundly influenced by watching live leak type videos, various disturbing and horrifying things that like our generation. We three doing the show are a bit older than you, but I feel like our generation, the geriatric millennials, we were the first to really be able to like grow up with this media, and then your generation too. How do you think that has like impacted your life? Does that make any sense? What is it like growing up on the internet with access to all of this real life disturbing media?
I mean, I can't say that it did anything like positive for me, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not as if so I grew up like going to Catholic school, and kind of being enmeshed in kind of, the severity of Catholicism all the time. So it's not like, like really kind of like graphic and like upsetting like art and like folklore and things like that like weren't a part of my life, but
right.
Like I specifically like I don't really remember like exactly like what age like I first started coming across these things, but like I remember like just like like when you're 14 or 15 and you're on 4chan and you like happen to see a gif of like like a guy getting like sucked into like a rolling machine or something.
Right.
Like you kind of almost like have to like immediately process it and just like move on, or you'll like go crazy from it.
Yes.
And like, I really think that like having to like sublimate all of that kind of stuff is like really bad for your soul. And like the issue for me specifically is that like I have really bad obsessive compulsive disorder, and like it's specifically about like kind of like compulsively like forcing myself to like recall images. And so like when I would see things like this, like they're always like flashing in my mind. Like there are still videos that I'll recall like to this day that like I'm just reminded of by like seeing like street objects or whatever. And like, you know, I'm obviously not like the only person who experiences things like this, because like I know a lot of people who feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I really related to that story in a way, you know.
And yeah, well, and I think the other thing too is that like, you know, the relative like quality and like accessibility of these kinds of things is like only getting more like pronounced.
Yeah.
Like it really has kind of like influenced like sort of how I like think about like the body and like the fallibility of it, I guess. Not to get like too heady and pretentious or whatever about it, but
Oh, totally. I mean, I think that's what was so interesting about bonding to me, is you touched on that. I personally hadn't quite seen that in media before. And it was cool to see acknowledgement of the fact that most people, I would say, like, regardless of if that's like, you know, if they're interested in horror or what, but like a lot of people who grow up with the internet just carry around with them this like, you know, catalog of disturbing things they've seen. And yeah, we all just have to live with it and move on, as you said, which is very interesting. I also wanted to ask about, specifically like related to, you know, our podcast. Of course, we talk about, you know, religious media and stuff, and the intersection of horror and religious media is interesting. In your short story Ammon, you talk about a character that is a young boy who's very obsessed with the apocalypse, and that leads to a really horrifying conclusion. But you know, we've talked about this on the show about like growing up young and like into religion and very sensitive, and all the really like heavy topics that have to be broached and, you know, accepted when you're a young person. And it can be very disturbing. And I wondered if that was coming from a real place for you, if that influenced that story.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that has been what has been such kind of like a joy for me about like going through the Boys Bible Study catalog, is like keep seeing those feelings validated like by the you know, everybody. Because yeah, absolutely. I mean, like the thing that was like some of the like first feelings that I can recall having are like these really intense like feelings of like dread, like really like deep-seated dread. And I'm, you know, subsequently like through, you know, like fucking therapy and shit like that, I've like come to kind of understand that like that is like a generalized anxiety, like OCD kind of thing, just like feeling really like something is very like wrong. And I specifically like kind of remember, I don't remember exactly when, but like remember the concept of like apocalypse, Armageddon, rapture, like all of those things kind of like melding into my brain and like sort of becoming like the like face of that dread. And
yeah.
So like I developed a lot of like weird compulsions surrounding like the idea of the apocalypse. Like, for example, when I would like wake up as a like 8 or 9 year old, and I would go to like, put clothes on for the day and like go to school, I would touch like a certain pair of like socks or underwear. And then if I felt myself reaching for a different pair because I didn't want to wear that for whatever reason, I would like instantly like have the thought, like if you don't put on the fucking Pikachu underwear today, like Armageddon's gonna happen. And it was like,
whoa.
And it would like scare the shit out of me, and so I would reach back and like grab the original underwear, but then it would be like, you fucked it up, like you didn't, like today's gonna be the day. And would just like feel that dread like all day, like almost kind of like waiting for it to happen. And I in my head want to say that it's not because of like my religious upbringing, but like of course it is. You know, like yeah. You know, it's, where else are you learning about these things at that age, if not Catholic school and, you know, kind of like traditional Catholic mass on Sundays and things like that. So I think like Catholicism in particular kind of imbues you with like a really powerful like pseudo superstition, I think.
Right.
Yeah. Just about like, you know, like ritual and like doing little things throughout your day, and like you kind of always have to like get it right, or like it's way off, and like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think it helps you feel like you have some sense of control in a situation that is clearly so far beyond your control.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because like even if you're allowed to like blame yourself for it happening, like, you know, at least you like foresaw it coming, you know, and you're not like surprised by it, I guess.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, well, I really think you captured some of those feelings of dread in Bonding. I would describe it as a book that is full of dread. So congratulations on that, truly. And so, yeah, in honor of Maggie coming on the pod, we, of course, wanted to dip our toes back into Christian horror. However, you know, to people new to the show, the idea of a Christian horror film might sound like an oxymoron, but there is actually a precedent for it. Boys, I think we should maybe remind or tell our new listeners about what are some other Christian horror films and filmmakers that we've gotten to cover so far in our run.
Well, Hangman's Curse was a good one, which was, I want to say, the same director as this movie, actually.
So
Maybe I'm wrong.
So the director of this movie, his name is like Robbie Hansen or something.
Yeah,
like
Robbie
that.
Henson.
Yeah, he directed a movie called House.
Yes.
Which is based on a novel by Ted Dekker and Frank Peretti. And then before this, he directed another just Frank Peretti adaptation,
Gotcha.
but I don't remember what it's called.
The Visitation. That's what I was confusing with Hangman's Curse because they're both Frank Peretti vehicles.
Gotcha. Yeah. That makes sense.
And The Visitation has Edward Furlong in it, notably.
Oh, really?
Whoa.
Damn. I haven't seen that one yet. We should cover it one
Non-peak
day.
Edward Furlong. We will definitely cover it at some point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We also, so definitely Hangman's Curse. Yeah, Frank Peretti, the novelist who wrote the source material for this film Thr3e is named Ted Dekker. The two of them are both like prolific kind of like Christian thriller, sometimes YA, sometimes directed at adults, fiction. We also watched two films that are beloved to our podcast that I don't really see covered many other places are, I guess three films are the Prey trilogy, which we covered very early on in the run of Boys Bible Study. But let's remind people about Prey and its filmmaker.
Directed by Matt Mitchell, who is like, I think a youth pastor in North Carolina, but very SOV style stuff, like really cheap digital, made with a ton of enthusiasm, seemed to be made pretty quickly too. Have some genuinely scary moments in them, and are like the first one is he's having so much fun with it that it's like he forgot that there was like a Christian message. Like it starts off and like they're at a Christian concert, but then at the end it's like, oh yeah, this has got to be Christian too. So then, I guess I shouldn't spoil it now. If you listen to the episode, you can hear how it gets spoiled. But it's really funny how he fits in that God helps out the protagonist in the end.
Yeah.
It's a big surprise for everybody.
Yeah, I think a common trait among the Christian thrillers is like seeing how they can kind of shoehorn in the Christian message. I think Thr3e was particularly funny in the way that it did that too. Which we'll definitely get to dig into some more as we review it. But I'd love to start telling listeners about Thr3e. One thing I will say is both to us and also to our gentle listeners, which is that like this is a film that delights in the plot twist and like the very sudden like plot development. The characters, characters may reveal themselves to be different characters or different, that which they don't originally seem, and it's very tedious to describe if we just like went through and did it all for you. I think it might be good to sort of do a general look rather than a beat by beats, because I could see that getting very tedious, although I did overall really enjoy the film. I guess let's talk in general, like with our thoughts on it. Overall, what did we like think? What's our first impressions after watching this movie before we discuss it? What do you think, Julian? You were particularly enthusiastic about it.
I loved it. I knew it was going to be a hit when they had like breaking national news that the seminary student was like what was it? He like dropped out or something. There was like the news. It was like CNN or something being like, seminary student Kevin Parson has dropped out of school today.
Everybody was pulling for him across the nation.
Yeah. Also, I love like just the super generic idea that somebody would research the idea of evil too much and lose their mind.
When Kevin locked the boy in the basement 15 years ago, he was actually locking away an alter ego in his own head. Then when Kevin's thesis forced him to fully examine the nature of good and evil in himself,
the boy resurfaced.
Like, how do you get to that point in your life when you're like that you're like that affected by learning about evil? And whenever they talk about him and his I mean, we can go into this more detail, but his like thesis statement or whatever he was writing about good and evil, whenever they were like, he's learning too much about evil, it would always show like these medieval drawings of like the devil and stuff. Like,
not very extreme illustrations.
Yeah, that's what made you go crazy, allegedly.
Yeah. This is a pre-Joker film, but like, we as a society are now sort of obsessed with the idea of like the Joker, or of someone who can like, get too into their disturbing media or interests, and it will, really just damage their brains. And I mean, here we are, almost 15 years pre-Joker.
Yeah.
We have Thr3e handling these very same topics from a religious.
It's a similarly cautionary tale for sure. I actually, coincidentally, I rewatched Joker this past Friday.
Oh, nice.
How did a lot of parallels?
Yeah.
Kind of. It was, what was funny is that DC handling mental illness felt more correct than the way that this handled it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this was just so blatantly a ripoff of Fight Club in Seven that there's like... It's,
to the point that they include the number 3 as one of the E's, much as... the number 7 replaces the V in the title 7.
Right. Yeah. And then like a little bit of speed too, with just the guy putting bombs and everything, especially and including a bus.
There were like 5 times more explosions than I expected there to be.
Oh yeah. Because I watched I totally forgot because I watched the first half like 2 weeks ago, and then the last half this morning. I forgot that it is a movie that has an explosion like literally every 5 minutes for the first
which made it a great follow-up. Made it a great follow-up to Beyond the Mask, the last movie we covered, which is also weirdly full of explosions. More weirdly for that one, since it takes place in 1776.
Yes, there's still so many mass bombings in that film. Very interesting. Maggie, as a studied horror fan, how do you rank Thr3e? What is your opinion?
Where's it go on the iceberg?
Film? Yeah, where does it go on the horror movie iceberg?
So, cosmically, we're down in the depths here. This is some pretty scary stuff. But, formally, there were some issues. But overall, I mean, this kind of has it all, right? I mean, in the first 15 minutes of the movie, I'm looking at my notes right now. I took a lot. In the first 15 minutes of the movie, we get like a Pink Flamingo style like family. We get, a dog gets blown up. There was let's see. I think the thing that is really interesting to me about this is that this is, I would think, 3 years after the first Saw came out, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure.
Right.
And it essentially like follows like the same kind of like rough plot structure, in that like you have like a mysterious like throaty voiced killer who's like putting people in these like trap type situations.
Yes.
But like the fun of Saw is that like technically you can escape the traps. And this movie the traps are simultaneously inescapable, but like always thwarted every single time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't really fully understand what suspense is. Like the idea that like like you said, that's a really good point. I was actually kind of trying to figure out why it was that this movie was not suspenseful at all somehow, despite the fact that like everyone was constantly in peril. And it was the constant combination of the movie never letting you think that there was any hole for there to be like an escape from any situation. However, they constantly escaped.
There were multiple instances where someone was in a room with a bomb and then another person like ran in and was like, you have to get out of here. And the other person would be like, I can't go. And then the bomb would explode and they would both be outside of the room. It's totally fine.
Right.
Well, and when Derek Wembley from Sum 41 has the bomb strapped to his chest and enters the police station and is like, you got to get this thing off me. Like they crack the code by like looking up a Bible verse and then counting the number of letters that are in
Romans 6:23.
Yes.
And then Romans has 6 letters, so you put another 6 after the 6, and that's how you disarm the bomb. It's just like, oh my god! Like,
Okay, here it is, right here. Romans 6:23. The wages of sin.
What's the third number? We need a third number.
Okay, there's 6 letters in Romans. Let's try 6:23.
There's definitely a lot of really memorable moments from this film. To give some background, it might be helpful to, in general, at least set up the scenario of this film, which is that we are dealing mostly, our protagonist is a theology student in seminary. This character's name is Kevin Parson.
The most famous seminary student in all the land.
Yes, the most consequential seminary student, which, I will say is like a really fun way that this becomes a Christian film, is if you just make the protagonist like someone who's going to seminary. And then
and I won't name any right now, but I'm sure we could all list a large handful of seminary students off the top of our head right now.
Right. But as one of us were saying, he's currently spending his time writing a thesis on evil. In the process of doing this, he is contacted by a terrorist or serial killer, a serial bomber, who it's tough for me to remember exactly what order this information is revealed, but we find out that this man's name is the Riddle Killer. He tells Kevin that he has sinned in the past and he must confess. And until he does that, terrible things will happen.
Hello?
You have 3 minutes to confess your sin before I blow your car up.
Someone must have left this phone in the car. It's not.
Kevin Parson, you can't hide in the seminary. You can't drive away from your past.
Who is this?
Don't you remember me, Kevin?
What do we think of the Riddle Killer, as in terms of like movie serial killers go, movie terrorists or movie, people like that? What do we think?
Did he ever really have any riddles?
Well, yes. What's that riddle, Scott?
Well, there's a number of riddles. Real quick, my problem with the riddles is that they solve them all immediately every time.
Yes.
it does take them an entire day to solve the first riddle, though. Like, they're all ruminating about it, like trying to figure out what the answer is between like three cops, Kevin, his insurance girlfriend.
Oh, that is true. The what falls but never breaks, what breaks but never falls.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Maybe they got like a book of riddles or something, so they could just flip to the back for the future ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was so funny. Yeah, the main sort of riddle that dominates the first act of the film is, as you said, what falls but never breaks, what breaks but never falls, which is like legitimately one step away from what walks on 2 legs, 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, 3 legs at night. It's like legitimately, it's just like one step away from that the entire time.
What was it? What was the answer?
Red all over.
Right. That actually kind of reminds me that an early memory of mine as a young Christian boy was going to the Christian bookstore, and my mom said I could pick out any book I wanted, and I bought a book called Goofy Clean Jokes for Christian Kids. And I think that this is what sort of made me passionate about comedy and storytelling through comedy. I'm still telling goofy clean jokes. So this is kind of like a goofy clean joke.
The goofy clean joke killer.
Yeah. Well, what's the answer? What falls but never breaks? What breaks but never falls?
Here's a clue. What falls but never breaks? What breaks but never falls?
What falls? Is this a joke? I have no idea what he meant.
What falls but never breaks. What breaks but never falls. Night falls and day breaks. The answer could be day and night.
Meaning what, though?
I don't know yet.
Night falls but never breaks, and day breaks but never falls.
Was that the answer?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's night.
It seems like if you were the Riddle Killer, you would like do something more specific to your victims and their lives instead of just like things that you could like look up, like Google,
right? Like
100 best riddles.
But they do have that whole thing though, where he's like they're talking about how Kevin Parsons is like obsessed with opposites, right?
Yes.
Like he's like obsessed with like his doctoral thesis is about good and evil.
That was so funny when they
the bus riddle about the bus, going anywhere and nowhere or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
What takes you there but takes you nowhere, Kevin. And remember, no cops.
I didn't like that riddle. It does not make sense.
That is such like
a
jaded high schooler's idea of like worldview.
Yes.
The bus just goes. It just goes and goes and never goes anywhere.
Right.
It's like written by somebody who's clearly never had to take a bus anywhere.
Yes. I think that was a really big like ongoing theme of this movie is the big brain.
Yeah.
Big brain ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Like they just for lack of a better way to say it, just like people who really thought they were doing something writing this movie.
Yeah.
An example is, and I was genuinely stunned when I saw this aspect of the set design in this film. I was like, I've never seen a film spell it out like this before. And there was a moment when they're in one of the scary buildings. I can't even remember which one. They're in one of the scary buildings and they see that there's many disturbing things written on the wall. And one of these things, if you look closely, says evil spelled backwards is live, which I honestly was like taken aback. I never in my life thought I would see a movie just go ahead and do that. I was really impressed.
This movie was like one step away from like the encounter where there's Mr. DeVille as the officer.
Yeah, Officer DeVille is so sick. I guess now that you mention it, there is definitely a history in Christian films. There's a treasured history of just really spelling it out, You
know what? The bus riddle ended up being good though, because the next thing they had to figure out was which bus they're talking about. And there's like, well, the 33 used to go by my house. And they're like, but there's 3 different 33s. So that was a good shoehorning of the 3 thing, I thought.
Sure.
He seems to be obsessed with 3s. 30 minutes to act, 90 seconds to save Roy.
Yeah, a huge theme of this movie was just like trying really hard to create like an intricate puzzle of like symbols and messages and riddles and stuff, and it was all just like so shallow and so
only based around the number 3 whenever they like kind of felt like it,
right?
Too
Right.
It was never, which I kind of get where the 3 is coming from because it's like good, evil, and the human body between or something.
Sure.
There's that
also,
thing at the end, the Holy Trinity.
Right.
Too.
Yeah. Also
But
reference the Trinity.
do they ever talk about that? the Holy Trinity.
I don't think they mention it once.
There's not much Christian stuff in this movie beyond the fact that he's like in seminary.
Right.
Yeah.
And that seminary professor who comes in at the end to like hand deliver the message they were trying to get across, apparently the whole movie.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. When he comes up and literally says like you need God.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. No,
and here's how life works. The end.
Kevin grew up in a world of shifting realities, with no absolutes. He created good and evil.
Samantha and Slater.
It's a battle we all have to struggle with. It's a battle we're powerless to win on our own.
We need the power of a Samantha.
We need the power of God.
The other big like Christian element in this film was, I mean, we really have, I'm always looking at like what is the important biblical text from this film. If there was one from this, one of you already said it, but Romans 6:23 becomes the foundational text. Pretty simple and very memorable biblical phrase. For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus our Lord, is the verse. Many people, I'm sure, even not people who are super Christian, have heard the wages of sin is death. That is the only real biblical text that we get hammered in. And it's not even really that the movie like explicates that or tries to, actually like turn that into a biblical lesson. They just kind of like use it because it says death in it. And he's a serial killer and he kills people. So, it's a pretty just like shallow use of biblical scripture. So one thing that you pointed out, Maggie, about the film, which I think is remarkable and like a testament to how the film just really tries to do everything, is the fact that the protagonist, Kevin, has, as you said, a Pink Flamingos style family. That's like one of the funniest aspects of this movie to me. What's his family like?
So he God, it's just the strange. I really just like fundamentally was not expecting like this element of the movie. Like I was expecting a lot of things from this, but like not that.
Yes.
So he is informed. Kevin Parsons is informed that somebody very close to him is potentially like in peril at that moment by the Riddle Killer or RK as he is sometimes known. And so he gets the phone call and he jets over to some sort of house and he like knocks on the door and this is a cousin, I guess, comes out and is, I believe, supposed to be mentally challenged or
yes.
in some sort of way, but it's just a gentleman with a bowl cut. And that was how they
it was like
convey that.
Almost on the level of like Something About Mary. It was like dark era Farrelly Brothers, right?
Like not like like not okay. So that's his cousin, and then his aunt Belinda comes out, and she is just like
amazing.
Just John Waters chic. Like
it reminded me of
the tiara.
It reminded me of like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane with like
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then her fez wearing husband Eugene.
He wears a fez. He's possibly a Shriner. So this was what was so funny about 3, and I feel like this happens with a lot of these kind of like mid to low budget, like late 90s Y2K films, is that they're not satisfied with the genre they are. Like so this is a thriller, okay? They have this entire storyline about, terrorist attacks, a serial killer solving riddles, like questions of evil and morality. but it can't just be like this guy's family is in peril. The family also has to be like these very elaborate, eccentric characters who like, you know, were like the father's like a hoarder, and like, you know, we have to learn a little bit about all their backstories and kind of like fall in love with all these like quirky characters, except for his like abusive mom who kind of looks like, you know, Courtney Love on the cover of Live Through This or something. But I just, oh God, that is just a huge pet peeve with me with films. When I saw The Family, I was like, what the fuck is going on here? You know, like we don't need this in the film. You know?
Yeah. It makes me wonder, like, is the book, like, is this stuff come from the book or does it come from the movie? Because the book came out in 2003.
I mean, the writer's working on both, so he's cool with it.
So either way, but it just like reeks of that like Christian movie writer trope that we've seen in a lot of these, where it's clearly somebody was just like, how do I write a movie? Well, I just take what I liked from all my favorite movies and I put them in the same movie, and I put quote scripture at the very beginning.
Right.
And I wouldn't be surprised if they wanted her in particular to have like an interesting role too, because Priscilla Barnes is probably the biggest person who worked on this movie.
Oh, I'm not familiar. What else is she known for?
Well, the first thing she was big for was taking over Suzanne Summers' role on Three's Company.
Three.
Three's Company with a number 3 in the title instead of.
Wow, that's why they got her. This explains everything. And she was actually in The Visitation right before this.
I see.
And she was in The Devil's Rejects, a couple movies before that.
I see.
Jane the Virgin.
As was another 3 cast member that we might get to at some point. The Devil's Rejects, that is. But she's in Mallrats too, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yes. Wow. Yeah. See, big get. Priscilla Barnes is a big get.
Big get. But yeah, that's, you know, again, the very eccentric family really sort of shows the, you know, both the fun quirks, but also like the seams of 3. But, you know, in the interest of fully explicating the film, I wanted to make sure we talk about. So the Riddle Killer, RK, is alluding to Kevin's, you know, sort of original sin, the big sin that he must confess to in order to save himself from the attacks of the Riddle Killer. What is this? What's the story of Kevin's sin, and how does that impact the goings on of the film?
So as the film continues and they're all trying to figure out why this guy is targeting Kevin, he reveals to the world that this guy just has he must be friends with like Rupert Murdoch or something.
Yes.
Because he can get literally anything he needs to say broadcast on every media outlet the instant he needs to say it. And he confesses to the world that when he was a kid, there was a bully that constantly tormented him, and he was chased into an abandoned building.
Yes.
By the bully after confronting him, and he knocked him unconscious and locked him in this abandoned building, and then ran away and didn't tell anybody.
Kevin Parson, the seminary student whose car was allegedly destroyed by the Riddle Killer yesterday, is on our action phone live to discuss important matters about the case.
Parson's on TV.
When I was 14, I got into a fight with this boy from our neighborhood. He chased me into this warehouse, and we fought. I ran out and locked him in. I left him to die. I'm a fake and a hypocrite.
What's he doing?
He's confessing.
So he is convinced that his sin was beating this kid and leaving him for dead. And now he believes that the Riddle Killer is either the kid or somebody who knows about the kid come back to get vengeance.
Yes.
Yeah, because he keeps leaving messages saying, "Let me out. It's so dark in here. Let me out."
Right.
In a matter-of-fact tone like that.
Let me out. Why did you leave me, Kevin?
Let me out of here.
Let me out.
TV just went off in Kevin's refrigerator.
Dark in here.
Oh, wait, let me hear him.
Quick, record
Let me
this.
out. It's so dark in here.
Right. And to me, this really hints at like the weakness of Thr3e, which is that like, one, you know, in the context of the film and what we're shown in the flashbacks and stuff, Kevin's childhood actions were basically completely justified. You know what I mean? Like maybe he could have like told someone, but like still, you know, the idea of him, like he was in a near death situation. Of course he wanted to like, you know, beat this guy. Like he was acting in self-defense, no question. But still, when he grows up, he's still like so like guilty about this sin. Like, oh, I wish I could have, you know, spared his life, even though I would have certainly died myself. And he's racked with guilt, but he's still kind of like a perfect guy at this point in the film.
Right.
You know, which was just a trope we tend to see a lot. You know?
He expresses that his desire to go into seminary was to atone for this action as well.
Right. Yeah. Also, the fact that it's supposed to be left ambiguous, like who the Riddle Killer might be. It's supposed to sort of be a mystery, but yeah, the killer saying, "Let me out. It's dark in here." Like early on in the movie, we know that Kevin's theory is like correct.
Yeah.
You know, it's like supposed to be ambiguous, but it's like totally correct.
But like the idea of that as like a childhood trauma to like carry with you, like in a vacuum, is really like a compelling and like kind of horrific idea.
Yes.
I think. Like,
yes.
Like,
yeah.
I would, you know, like that's, you know, because it is so like ethically fraught and like it's such an interesting, it's a more interesting like ethical question than I would have expected them to raise, that you get to like kind of chew on for like maybe 5 minutes before it just like completely drops the ball and like sends it somewhere else.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, on some level there was really compelling story stuff going on. I would be curious to see how this was exactly how this was adapted from Ted Dekker's novel. My thought is that the book is better because you have time in a book to really go over, you know, to really talk about, like, for instance, the different characters in his family, or to, you know, really examine these ethical questions. Whereas like a movie is a bit more pressed for time, even though it can be pretty long and so much happens. It's like, you know, I have a feeling like the book is better and maybe ruminates on this question more, but the movie just feels really
because at this point in particular, where he is confessing, like the next scene that it just cuts to is he's frantically running around his apartment with like a bunch of fans on, and his thesis is just blowing all over the place.
Yes.
Like I 100% guarantee, having not read the book, that the book does not deliver that kind of vibe.
Yes.
That you could only pull off in a movie. I mean, it's just a truly absurd moment.
I mean, I don't know. We're talking about the guy who wrote the movie Thr3e.
Right.
It's not outside of the realm of possibility that he also wrote a scene in a book where a bunch of fans blew up thesis around.
But yeah, you know, moving on, I think, you know, at this point, anyone interested in watching the film, this is a very plot-based film. We are definitely going to go into some spoilers here. This is what apparently the movie is completely building to, although when it happened, I was very surprised and thrown off, and not in a good way, I would say. I was very, you know, just sort of taken aback by how this movie resolved. But
turn the episode off now and go watch 3
if
you don't want it to be spoiled.
Yes. But let's spoil it. Let's talk about how the final act of this movie pans out. There's many twists and turns.
Sure. Yeah. So, there is a moment where Kevin's like love interest, who as /childhood friend, it starts to express her concern to one of the police officers that she believes that Kevin may be suffering from like dissociative identity disorder, and that like this other personality is like manifesting perhaps, and that the Riddle Killer himself may actually just be two halves of Kevin Parsons.
Right.
but that's not quite the end of the twists and turns. Because I guess as it turns out, Samantha too, the love interest, is also a sort of figment of his disability, and they sort of come together as the titular three in the film, I think.
Yes. A lot going on there. One that, again, another like huge weakness in this film is, like you said, there's that entire scene where the two women, the detective and his love interest, who I want to say look very similar to each other.
Yeah, so
really
confusing.
confusing.
Yeah, and had like similar ways of speaking and similar voices.
Yes.
Identical women.
Yeah, basically like facial
similar
features that are different.
hairstyles.
Yeah,
One of the many ways this movie was very CW-esque.
Yes. Yes. But so they're talking to each other, and we see an entire scene where the two women are talking to each other, and this is how like you said, the dissociative identity.
The
Right. Two women are talking to each other about the different personalities of a man. Wait, does the movie pass the Bechdel test if one of the two women just doesn't exist?
Right,
actually?
and she is actually part of that man's psyche.
Yeah.
So for all we know, it's just the guy going, like affecting a voice on the phone to talk to her. Which is,
right.
Well, what she is doing.
Right.
Hello, detective.
No, you have to get out.
But it's so funny because the movie expects us to believe in a final revelation that his love interest doesn't even exist. Why show us an entire scene of them on the phone? It's not like and it's not presented in the same way that like The Sixth Sense, where you can rewatch it and you see that Bruce Willis isn't actually interacting with anything in the world. Yes.
Right.
Like she is very clearly interacting with things and like talking to people.
Yes.
Well, and the way that they explain that too is that they do it several times where they have these flashbacks where they'll go, but no, actually, I only saw you there. I thought I did, but I didn't. You know what it's like?
It was a weather balloon.
I don't even think the boy is the boy.
What?
Kevin Stalker only appeared when he was finishing his thesis. It's all about good and evil, light and dark.
Opposites.
So what if Kevin and his stalker are opposites in the same person?
But the boy exists. You saw him.
No. I thought I had, but I realized I never really did. I just thought I did because Kevin talked about him all the time.
But someone left a cassette player outside your hotel room door. Wasn't Kevin with you?
I thought he was sleeping. And the person outside his window could have been a news reporter. The boy doesn't exist. Kevin's personality split.
Yeah, but it's like, but the movie shows us. The movie shows us the thing that they didn't actually see, and so it's very confusing. Earlier, you described it as gaslighting, which I think is kind of true. It's like we watched the whole movie, and then at the end of the movie, you're going to tell me that like I actually didn't see that stuff. Like, oh, well, then what's the point?
With my own eyes?
Yeah. Well, what's the point of showing me the fucking movie if you're at the end of the movie, you're going to say, oh, this didn't actually happen, by the way.
Right. They try to, it's like definitely aping Fight Club, but it's not pulled off in a way that makes any sense at all.
No.
Because like when they show the clips in Fight Club where it's like Edward Norton replaces Brad Pitt, spoiler alert. But like it makes sense in this one. It's just like, how can this guy's three people at once that are all interacting with other people at the same time.
And even in that instance, he has a gun pointed at his own head and
so
one
funny.
pointed at the detectives. Like, what, you also have two guns for this? Like, it just doesn't, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
It's kind of implied that the detective can see the other two people in the room. I mean, it's not implied, but it's just, I think, just terrible filmmaking for what they were trying to pull off.
Yeah.
Right.
All of this of coming to a climax in a cellar where the bombs are being made, and Kevin's aunt is tied up to be his next victim.
Right.
Slater shot Sam.
Kevin, look at me. Kevin, there's no one in here except you, me, and Belinda.
What?
Samantha and Slater aren't real.
Why are you saying that?
Slater is Kevin. But so are you. He created you both when he was a little boy, locked in that house. You were created from all the good things he wanted in a friend.
But you saw Sam at the hotel and at the police station.
Hey, you! Now! I never saw Sam. And outside the hotel, it was you in the car. I never actually saw her. Let's go.
Actually, Maggie, can you talk about the final scene with Slater, the new character we meet, who is another sort of disassociative manifestation?
So Slater is essentially evil Kevin, who is sort of it is revealed to us that Slater manifests as a result of Kevin being like physically abused by his aunt Belinda. And so Slater is played by actor Bill Moseley, right, who is like pretty much 95% of the reason I wanted to watch this movie.
Yes.
Because, I mean, he's incredible. Best known for Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 and all those fucking Rob Zombie movies, and he's just great. But in this, he, he's working for the paycheck, and he just kind of... he has this very kind of like Will Forte-esque delivery throughout the entire thing that's just like very odd and like off-putting. But yeah, he's a big, tall, lanky guy, and he wants Kevin to, I guess, confess to being mentally ill to some extent. I think is ultimately like what's kind of revealed as like the personalities break down and things like that.
Yeah, totally. A very interesting character, and it was really cool. I agree that they got Bill Moseley for this. It was definitely a casting highlight. However, he was pretty underused, and I thought his performance was also was a bit weird considering his accomplished horror career. But yeah, that scene. How does it end? How does that scene resolve? How does that very tense like standoff resolve?
So he very kind of like poetically just sort of wills them out of existence.
Yeah.
I think he does shoot into the air at Slater, if I'm not mistaken.
He shoots like a mirror or something.
It shatters.
I think this is like a really good lesson for like anyone out there struggling with mental illness, which is like just like try not to do that.
Just make it go away.
Just if somebody tells you to snap out of it.
Yeah, have you ever?
You need to listen to them.
Yeah.
You ever just tried not?
Drink some water.
Yeah. But again, in a movie with tons of twists and turns, this isn't even really the end of it.
No.
We find out that there is actually a Riddle Killer.
Well, before that,
yes,
I just want to go back to the whole like all of Kevin's problems are stemming from his abusive childhood.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Which is just like, yeah, that's fair. But it's also like the compelling part of his story was this like incident that happened when he was a child that he's still wrestling with and has never told anybody about. And by like saying that, no, actually it was his abusive childhood that made him make up all this stuff. I don't know. It just felt like it really just ruined the whole like everything that was interesting about the movie.
Yes.
By just trying to put like a hat on a hat and being like having the priest at the end just be like, oh yeah, he'll be locked up here, but his and walks free, and she's the real criminal. And it's just like such a funny, like weird button on that whole thing.
She still thinks Eisenhower's the president.
Yeah, it was like, it's such a strange thing to also imply that, like, yeah, she's living happily in this
like she's
weird
free
carnival
in any sense.
house that she lives in. Yeah.
After having just been like tied up and like
right,
like nearly annihilated in in a serial killer compound. I don't think she escaped unscathed.
No, nor does that absolve her of her sins.
Sure, right,
but still, it was just like they were just trying to pile every single thing onto this guy at the very end of the movie. I guess as a way of being like, okay, yeah, the protagonist was the villain the whole time, but you shouldn't hate him. It wasn't his fault.
Yeah.
It just felt like they only added this whole like childhood abuse subplot for the reason to have the twist. When in reality, like, he could have had, if it wasn't a really bad movie, maybe they would have just had him like beat up and lock the kid in the basement. And that was like the root of his, all of his anxiety revolving around this Riddle Killer stuff.
Right, because that would have been interesting, because it could have talked about how sin or perceived sin could, affect someone's life.
Yeah.
Again, it never really, it never committed to the idea that there was any moral ambiguity. It presented itself as like a morally ambiguous film, with characters making morally ambiguous decisions, but like there never actually is any ambiguity. It's always like everyone's action is always completely justified, or they're like completely damnable,
Right. The face of it looks like it's a vague, murky crime world, same as like most crime thrillers are, but then very quickly they get to the binary good or evil with everything.
Absolutely. This is a film that deals very heavily in binaries. I mean, it's right even in the idea that there's all these opposites that Kevin is obsessed with. This becomes a key like motif of the film.
So funny.
He's
been driven mad by thinking about opposites too much.
you write the words good and evil on a whiteboard, and you just sit there and stare at it, and eventually you start going insane because your mind can't handle contradictions.
I literally made a note of a moment in the film where they're discussing his thesis, and a character goes opposites, and then there's a shot of the word evil written on a wall, and another shot of the word good written on a wall.
That was great.
God, this movie kicks ass. I love it. They really don't make them like this as much. Actually, they make a lot of them like this, which is like the problem with this film. That really is. I do want to say now, I am not exactly a supporter of the carceral state in its current form. However, I was a little shocked at how free Kevin was. Just like,
where was he at the end? They were like, this is a good place for him, and it was just like
he was just sitting on a bench
or something.
Yeah. I mean, we see him. The detective visits him, and he's just sort of sitting absentmindedly on a park bench, which is like, well, I mean, in the middle of this compound, ostensibly this secure compound, but like, keep in mind, this is a guy who, with very limited resources, is able to like make like complicated bombs and like put them in moving buses and do it like in a moment's notice, like do it with, like
on a grad student salary.
Although I will say in the film, it's portrayed that he's attending grad school purely based on like insurance, right?
Oh, right. He has all that money because of his parents died in an accident.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, it's just kind of funny in the movie because he's just like,
he lives in like a warehouse.
Yeah.
Like an immaculately decorated warehouse.
Yeah. And he can just, he's
just off of unlimited money. I mean, his parents apparently were like owners of like News Corp or something.
Yes.
Which maybe is how like he can get
on
the news so easily.
Right.
Part of his inheritance.
Yeah, I guess the implication at the end was like, because we all agree that he is a mentally unstable person, that of course, he would not go to a prison.
Right.
But for the person who wrote this movie, I hate to break it to you, but that's about 99% of people in prison.
Right. Right. But yeah, even in spite of all of this mass revelation, multiple personalities, there is still a riddle killer who is out there. The movie cannot end. Like it cannot do enough.
This is so funny. This is where I was like, this is my kind of movie.
Well, tell us about it. What was the final revelation?
I don't even remember how they get to this point.
I just know there's a picture of a hot dog vendor.
Yeah, I remember. Truth be told, I was trying to figure out a DS emulator while I was watching the last 30 minutes of this movie. So the details are a little hazy, but all of a sudden she's like talking to the priest at the end or another cop. At some point, she's like, oh, he wasn't the Riddle Killer the whole time. It was the guy right under our noses. It was the hot dog vendor from the very beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
Who had a copy of my book. And they go to it. He's still a hot dog vendor and they raid his hot dog cart. Yeah. It was so funny. Not too different than the end of Confederacy of Dunces, by the way. But yeah, they track this guy down and what did they find another one of his bombs, and he's just instead of being in handcuffs or anything, he's just standing there watching and being oh, she's like, why'd you do it? And he's like, I told you I don't like copycats.
Right.
So I guess the implication was that I think Kevin and this guy were setting bombs simultaneously.
Sure.
Which is how some of the bombs that don't make sense for where Kevin is got set.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Because he's in the background, taking pictures. They see him in the
yes
in the background of a newspaper photo, and on the front page of a newspaper. And Kevin is studying the Riddle Killer as Slater, and makes the connection himself through his own little detective work. And then the real Riddle Killer simultaneously is also taking pictures of him to kill him, which would have been a sick movie as well, but they chose not to go that direction.
Yeah,
I guess.
Dueling bombers.
One thing I wasn't clear on though, did he set up the fans to blow around Kevin's thesis, or was he just waiting to take pictures of?
Well, because there's a flashback where Kevin picks up a rose a circulating fan and throws it. He rips it out of a socket as Slater and throws it across the room. And there's another one blowing pages around right at the end.
Okay, so it was his alter ego Slater that went and got all the fans and set them up to.
Yeah. For a sloppy movie, they did go out of their way to close that particular movie.
Just the logistics of that, of having to go to the store and buy a bunch of fans and then set them up is so funny. If you think about the guy setting a bomb and then being this needs a little more. I'm going to set up
and he's going through Bed Bath and Beyond, just wordlessly, combing through different cheap box fans.
Yeah. Think about when you have to set up a fan when it's really hot and getting the cable and it gets stuck on the corner of something and you have to lift the thing up or move it again. And he had to do that 9 times just to blow a bunch of papers around.
Right. Yeah. It's, I would say overall, that was what was so confounding about this film was the amount of attention to detail poured onto one object like that, an obsession with closing plot holes and keeping up these motifs and doing stuff, but almost completely focused on the unimportant things and so many other things just left absolutely unsolved, baffling, straight up just showing you information that you didn't need to see. It proved to be a confounding watch for me.
It reminded me a lot of Mayor of Easttown, which have any of you seen that?
Yeah, I watched it.
Oh yeah. It's just just not trying to explain so many things that need no explanation. And at that point of the story, you don't even care. Like,
oh yeah, the way they ended it was totally unnecessary. But I would say a difference in Mayor of Easttown is they could have gotten away with it had they, like, I don't know, just not had that last episode.
Right. Yeah. And I feel the same way about this movie. Like, it's just like, you just made it even more unbelievable by trying to make it believable.
Yes. You know, it's weirdly comparable, and this is 100% because I watched it last night, but Tenet, if they just didn't explain why there were things that were going backwards in time while things were going forward in time, that would be like a really wild sci-fi to take in.
Yeah.
But instead, they tried to give it a scientific explanation, which fortunately, I've finally seen enough Christopher Nolan movies to expect that going in and not be like really irritated at the end of it.
Yeah, you know, I watched that movie and I just straight up skipped all the parts where they were explaining stuff, and it was so much better.
That totally makes sense.
It was just like this like tableau of action, very cool action.
Very cool action.
No talking. It was great.
Yeah, this movie sort of had all the satisfaction of like listening to an Immortal Technique song where it's like you listen to like rhymes for like 8 minutes and then at the end you're like, oh wow, that's the same thing as the beginning. That's pretty cool.
You can't do that. I almost spit out water all over my laptop.
But it's that type of art, you know what I mean? But like not even. Honestly, we should do an episode about Immortal Technique's song "Dance with the Devil" one time.
I was going to say,
kind of sick. That'd be a good bonus episode.
A good bonus for sure.
I one time was like when I was in high school, a couple boys like sat me down and like made me listen to that song without talking, so we could like hear how good it was. And then it got to the end, it was like, oh damn.
A friend of mine made me do that with A Crazy Game of Poker by OAR.
That's so sick.
And it was like the most excruciating 12 minutes of my life.
Yeah, that song's terrible.
I think I need to get into OAR next. That's a really good idea.
Oh
That's what's coming back. People are going to be wearing tricorn hats and listening to OAR.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, so Thr3e, I guess like main general discussion question that I want to put to Maggie as a big horror fan and now someone who's written a horror a horror collection of short stories. I want to know, do you think Christian horror is possible? And if so, is there an example of it or what would that look like to you?
God, this is one of those things that like I was like, I knew you were going to ask me this, and I was like really kind of like struggling to come up with any like really definitive like examples of it. I did, we were talking about before this, we were talking about Pasolini, and I think I read an interesting essay that essentially made an argument that Solo is like just as Christian of a film as like Gospel According to St. Matthew.
Wow, yes.
And I think, I would effectively agree with that in the sense that, like, it's very much a movie about how, like, in some ways, like, usurping, like, God's godliness for, like, man's power is, like, like, the most horrific thing you can do. Yeah. And so, like, obviously, like, with that said, absolutely, like, there's a huge vacuum that I think could be filled, in like the Christian horror sphere. I guess like the paradox with it, right, is that like you sort of the types of studios and just like firms and people in general that want to like finance these kinds of movies like probably don't want to like create something that is like genuinely like unsettling and like a really like kind of like difficult to grapple with way, even if it's still like theologically sound. Right. Because like you can't like you could make some really compelling Christian art that just deals with your even just some of the most basic like religious concepts, but like it would be hard to sell that to a Christian audience because like you would have to really like grapple with the horror of those things. Yes. but yeah, so as far as how this movie stacks up in like the Christian horror sphere, it doesn't even really feel like a Christian film to me, to be honest. It's really like I was really kind of shocked at how kind of cynical it is almost to call this like a Christian film. Like it's as if like Fox just like scooped up some like the rights to a couple of Christian novels and we're like, whatever, we'll fucking sell it to these chumps. Right. And I don't know. So the question was what again? Sorry.
Oh no, I mean no, that was a great answer, but it was basically just like, does Christian horror exist? What would that look like? What would is it possible to make a studio Christian film by a Christian creator for a Christian audience that also genuinely delves into horror? I almost don't I think it's an oxymoron because to create the horror experience, which what I love about horror and what we all I'm sure love about horror is the fact that it does really have you grapple with disturbing concepts and with things in your own life or that you've seen or fears you have that are genuinely unsettling, and it gives you almost like, God, I hate this term, but like a safe space, you could say, to like experience that. I don't know if that's possible in a Christian film. I think a Christian film is inherently supposed to be a place where you do not have to really question or grapple with anything.
I mean, I feel like the movie Doubt would be a good example of like a Christian horror film that deals with difficult questions and like behaviors within a religious institution. It's not like overtly horror, but like it's a very real problem that is being dealt with in the movie. And I mean, you're never going to see that movie on christiancinema.com or PureFlix.
That movie totally undermines itself though at the end.
Yeah. I mean, that it's got its own problems. So, but that like, to me, that's like what a truly like Christian horror movie would be like, is like maybe a reckoning with like past actions within the church or like hypocrisy within the church, which you don't really see that much beyond like the hypocrisy of the individual or never the institution. And at the end of the day, the only way you're going to get I mean, if you were to present that to some financier for Christian movies, I'm sure they would say like, why is Christianity the villain when Christianity has a villain? It's the devil.
Right.
So like, it just, I don't think we would ever see a Christian horror movie in the same way that we see the movie Thr3e as a Christian horror movie. Distributed by Fox's like Faith division or whatever this was.
Or like PureFlix putting it out. Honestly, probably as close as anything PureFlix has done is Beckman, and that really didn't do very well and wasn't very big, despite it being like a really good take on John Wick. Yeah, I think it's just like too much intense and dark stuff in it, and people like I think for like your family, or quote unquote for your family viewing, people don't want that,
right? But still, everyone, almost everyone who consumes popular culture is compelled by horror for the same primal reasons that we all are. It doesn't surprise me that there are Christian filmmakers who want to take their own stab at it. Prey is probably my favorite because it's so whimsical, because it's a Christian guy who watched the movie Halloween and is like, way more proficient with a camera and like setting up, directing a film than your average person. And so did a really sort of whimsical and delightful, if not particularly like horrifying, bloodless take on the movie Halloween, which I find very whimsical. The main Christian takeaway I have from Thr3e is that the scene early on in the film where you had to know Romans 6:23 to solve the code, that led me to believe it's like, wow, like if you really know your Bible, that means if a terrorist attack happens with a biblical code, then you're ready to go. Like how cool is Christianity?
I mean,
this your Bible.
Yeah, I mean, this is Christian in the sense that it's just like a Western movie. I mean, like, and like in Western civilization, it's kind of just like operating on this base level that, hey, we're all Christian here. We all subscribe to like the Christian worldview.
Right.
Where it's just sort of like a network television show where like a detective is a priest or something. You wouldn't necessarily be like, oh, this is a Christian show.
Right.
But it like relies on this idea that like, oh yeah, everybody who sees this movie is just going to accept the fact that it's like Christian.
It gets to be Christian, like insofar as like there's no swearing or like blood, like a character has a bruise.
Right.
You know, and like all of those things, I guess.
Which, yeah, it's wild because there's child abuse, there's child murder, there's like attempted explosions of people. Like a guy at the beginning is duct taped to the driver, the steering wheel of a car, and he's blown up in front of his sister. And it's like, those are arguably worse things than blood and swearing.
I was gonna say, like there are multiple like scenes like shot in flashback of like a child like taped to a chair, like getting waterboarded with a dunce cap on, like you know, like these are the kinds of like that's a Christian horror moment. Like that was like you know like by far like one of the more like unsettling things in the movie, but like it doesn't, you know, like in terms of like its own like internal morality, it's like functionally the same as like Seven. It just doesn't have as much like sex and violence in it, you know?
Right.
And it's like a common failing of Christian movies, particularly horror movies or things where somebody has like a dark past, where real life traumas are presented in such an extreme way that it's like totally unrelatable for the audience.
Yes.
Or like, you would never suspect that somebody else in your church could be abusing their child because they've never tied him to a chair and put a dunce cap on him and thrown water on him, because that's what child abuse is.
Yes.
Right.
That's spot on. Yeah. Thr3e. What a film. Oh man, I'm not gonna lie. Hold on. I have to tell, I wrote a joke that I was really trying hard to slip in during this discussion and I didn't get to, so I'm just going to say it right now. This film was shot on location in Poland, and you could tell because all the submarines had screen doors on them. Okay, thank you. True. I just wanted to say that.
Cut out my laughter. You don't deserve that.
Yeah, okay. That's fair. That's fair. Hey, listen, this is I edit the show, so there's going to be a big round of applause when I say that.
The whole studio audience is going to we should add that. We should have a studio audience from now on.
One day. That's when we hit the when we hit 100 subscribers on Patreon. That's what it's going toward.
It was gorgeous though.
Yeah.
And, like, I mean, like but you can also tell like immediately that this is not taking place in New York City like they want you to think it is. Like none of the architecture is like American at all.
Yeah,
and
right.
Like
but I mean, submarines had screen doors.
Yeah, there were so many people trying to screw in light bulbs at once.
True, yeah. The army was running backwards.
Yeah. Yeah. Thr3e. Shout outs to the director, Robbie Henson, and writer of the source material novel, Ted Dekker. You guys really did bang up job with this one. We all here at Boys Bible Study got to hand it to you. But what do you say, boys, and our guest today, Maggie? What is our final official Boys Bible Study rating of the film, Thr3e?
You know, for a film that occasionally offered a little bit too much, I think at the end of the day, I was left with a lot to chew on. I think it had a lot of capital T themes. And I am going to give it one lonely boy out of one blue house out of one black dog.
Who are you? Who are you, Kevin? Are you still the lonely boy in a blue house, taking comfort from your pain with a black puppy?
I loved it. It was my kind of movie. as soon as they, well, it was a lot to sit through before it became a my kind of movie.
Yeah.
But once you had the protagonist pointing the gun at the back of his own head in like that meme where it's like, don't trust anyone, not even yourself. And then we get like the final twist that it was the hot dog vendor the whole time. And he's still like vending hot dogs and they raid his little hot dog cart. That's just so magnificent to me. I'll give it 3 out of 3 Christian podcasters.
A perfect score, 3 out of 3. I just want to add that in the Boys Bible Study group chat, Julian said, "This film reminded me why I love movies."
Wow.
So some high praise behind the scenes.
High praise.
What do you think, Scott?
I really appreciated that one of the addresses they had to go to find a bomb to try to disarm with a black goop that only slowed it down. The address was 369 33rd Street. I really like that.
That's so gay.
So for this incredible movie that offered us so much and so little at the same time, I'm going to have to give it 333 out of 333 thesis pages. Oh no, my fans, they're blowing them everywhere.
Oh no. Oh God, it could happen to anyone. Don't get too down on yourself. But
I'll help you pick those up.
Thank you.
But yeah, another perfect score for a perfect film. As for me, I've got to say, I found the film to be baffling and bewildering. But it was very compelling. I mean, hey, we're talking about it, aren't we? I mean,
any press is good press.
All press is
especially
good
if you're a seminary student dropping out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That guy, we could learn a thing or two about viral moments from Kevin Parsons. He was all over the news. I'm going to have to give this film 3 fezzes out of 3 because I'm a big Shriner fan, as I know Julian is too.
Yeah.
And although it wasn't explicitly stated, I'm going to assume that Kevin's father or stepfather was whatever he was, is a Shriner, which to me elevated this movie
so
to the divine.
They're just like, this guy, this guy is not well. He's wearing a Shriner's hat.
Yeah. But yeah, that was our take on 3. And Maggie, thank you so much for watching this film and talking about it with us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a dream.
Can you please tell, we'll certainly link to it in the description, but can you please tell everyone listening where they can read your book, Bonding?
Yeah. So I'll give a PDF to anybody who wants one.
Amazing.
So just find me on Twitter at Maggie Siebert. But if you want a physical copy, you can buy it at expatpress.com. And we just got the second printing in like yesterday. So they're ready to go.
Amazing. Yeah, I highly recommend picking up a copy if you want to read it physically because my thought when I was reading it, I said this to you, but my thought when I was reading it, the arc of the fact that it's a collection of short stories and that you're so masterful at capturing this like feeling of dread. I would say of all genres of horror, I felt like dread the most while reading. And it was like each story, the rise and fall of that dreadful feeling was like riding waves of it. I thought it was a really impressive experience. So,
well, thank you so much.
Yeah. Amazing. Highly recommended. Thanks again for coming on. On our side of things, as always, we would like to remind, if you haven't yet subscribed to our show, please go to boysbiblestudy.com and there's links there to subscribe to anywhere you can find our podcast. We're on basically every platform. Also, if you really like what we do and you want to support the show and hear even more content, check out patreon.com/boysbiblestudy, where if you subscribe for $5 a month or more, we make 2 or more bonus episodes every month that we don't release to the public. So we would love for you to hear those. Also, we want to shout out our very special patrons at the $20 tier. If you are pledging at that tier, you get shouted out at the end of every show. So we want to especially thank Nicole, Marissa, Jeff, and Jane. Thank you so much for your generous support. Our outro song is Oh My God by Mary. Stream Mary's music on Bandcamp and Spotify. From all of us here at Boys Bible Study, myself, Ash, my co-hosts, Scott and Julian, our guest today, Maggie Siebert, we would like to say, peace be with you.
And also with you.
You dissolve as you walk into Ash.
Yes.
Same for me and Scott.
Oh yeah. By the way, this is.
That was so
By the
good.
way, if you were listening to this podcast, there's only one. I'm the only person doing the show.
Wearing a Fez hat.
Scott and Julian are all identities that I've taken on to express my twisted worldview.
FO4R.
Yeah. All right.
Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I feel your love and may